Hello everyone. So in this session, I am going to discuss chapter number 10, international trade. We have a whole course on global trade, a separate course, right? So if you are more interested in that course, you can also see the course listing of RDP, that is the SBSC. So in this session, I'm going to succinctly, briefly discuss this topic, international trade. So these are the learning objectives of this chapter. Explain the importance of international trade and why nations trade with each other. So I'm going to take a simple example and show you that if two countries trade, they both gain. Explain why nations import certain goods even though they can be made more cheaply at home. So we will also discuss the reason behind it by discussing the theory of comparative advantage. So sometimes one country has absolute advantage in all production process for all goods and services, but it's still that country imports a certain goods and services from another country. This is because of the comparative advantage that we will discuss. Explain how the gains from trade are divided between trading partners. We'll discuss this, but not in detail, definitely. Describe why some groups win and others lose as a result of freer trade, and explore trade restrictions. So by international trade, if you look at the second objectives, third objectives, explain how the gains from trade are divided between trading partners. So yes, the country as a whole gains from trade, but it does not mean that each and every one in that country will also benefit from trade. So we always have winners and losers. So of course, those who are winners, they are always in favor of freer trade or free trade, and those who are the losers, they are always against free trade. And finally, we also talk about trade restrictions that governments imposes, Canadian government imposes certain trade restrictions. So all governments impose certain restrictions on trade. So we are not going to go in detail in this section as well, but we'll discuss on four restrictions, and we will emphasize on only one of them. So first theory of trade is theory of absolute advantage. What is theory of absolute advantage? Nations, like firms and individuals, should specialize in producing goods and services for which they have an advantage. They should trade for goods and services for which they do not enjoy any advantage. So this is the theory that was proposed by Adam Smith. And according to Adam Smith, if one country has advantage in producing one product, another country has advantage in another product, then these two countries should trade. So for example, if one country, the environment is more conducive to the production of rice, for example, and the other country, the environment of producing cotton is more efficient. That is because of the simply differences in nature. Then these two countries only specialize in those two products. So one country should produce only rice, the other country should produce only cotton, and then these two countries can trade and gain from that trade. Remember, I kept saying gain. By gain, I mean this is what we call it's not a zero-sum game. By zero-sum game, I mean if one country is gaining, let's say $10, then the other country must be losing $10. That is what we call zero-sum game. So it's not a zero-sum game; it's a positive-sum game. Both countries will gain. Okay. So let's take an example. So if you see, we have output per worker. So we have productivity of worker. And we have two products, beer and wine. And two countries, Fredonia and Liberland. Now look at the productivities of workers in these two countries. So I can see in Fredonia, the workers are more productive in the production of beer compared to wine. And in Liberland, the worker are more productive in wine compared to beer. So what we are going to do, these are productivities, remember, that is per productivity per worker, one worker. So if I compare vertically like this, so let me first fix my font size of my pen. Let's see, sorry, 3, 2, okay. Just give me a second. Yes. Now we compare vertically like this. So see, first we take this product beer and we just compare these two numbers. And see, the workers are more productive in Fredonia compared to Liberland in the production of beer. Similarly, if we compare wine, then we notice that workers in Liberland, they are more productive than workers in Fredonia in the production of wine. So which country should specialize in which product according to Adam Smith or according to theory of absolute advantage? So Fredonia should specialize in the production of beer and Liberland should specialize in the production of wine. And when I say specialize, I mean completely specialize. So Fredonia will not be producing wine at all. Fredonia is only producing beer. Similarly, Liberland is only producing wine. But in real world, it is not the case. Right? United States is producing automobiles and at the same time importing automobiles from Japan. So it's not the case that we have complete specialization. If we are importing something, we are not going to produce at all in the home country. But this is the very basic theory. In global trade course, we actually relax this assumption, and then we discuss that suppose if the country is producing the that product domestically as well as importing as well. Or maybe in the last section of this chapter, oh yeah, I remember, we will discuss this scenario as well, that it is possible that countries are producing one product domestically and at the same time importing that product from other country as well if the demand is more than the domestic supply. So if the domestic producers are producing 10 units and the domestic demand is 20, then that additional 10 excess demand will be imported. We'll discuss in a moment, but very briefly. But here we are assuming it's a complete specialization. Now we will try to show you how two countries will gain from this trade. So suppose that initially the working population of each country is 20 million. So now I'm giving you the information of total number of workers in these two countries, because in the previous slide I showed productivity per worker. So this table talks about only one worker. This is the three whatever cases of beer per worker. Okay. Now we have the total number of workers, that is 20 million, and with 10 million working in each industry. So I also know what is the distribution of these workers between these two countries within a country. Now, what is the total output of the two countries without any trade? So suppose there's no trade, and what I have done, I have actually provided you this information again from the previous table so that you can compare. So what is happening actually, that in Fredonia, you have 10 million workers here and you have 10 million workers here. You know that each worker is producing four cases. So 10 times 4 is 40. So 40 million cases will be produced of beer, will be produced in Fredonia. And similarly, 1 times 10 is 10 million. Wine, similarly in Liberland, 30 million, and 4 means 40 million. So total production of these two countries, the total production of beer would be 70 and the total production of wine would be 50 million, whatever be the units. So if you are measuring in liters, then it will be 50 million liters. Okay. So this is the total production. Remember this: beer 70 million, wine 50 million. Remember, there's no trade right now because you can see both countries are producing both products, that is beer and wine. Let's take what would happen if trade takes place. That is, Fredonia will use all 20 million workers in the production of beer, and Liberland will use all its 20 million workers in the production of wine. So this would happen. So now I once again have given you this table so that you can calculate. So now in Fredonia, we have 20 million workers in the production of beer, zero in wine, because Fredonia is not producing wine, right? Just specializing in the production of beer. So total production of beer in Fredonia would be 4 times 20, 80 million. But the production of wine is zero. Similarly, Liberland is specializing in the production of wine. So 4 times 20 workers is 80. So 80 production of wine in Liberland, but zero beer, because Liberland is not producing beer at all. And you can see now the total production would be 80 and 80. So we have gains of 10 million more beer and 30 million more wine. So total production of both countries will increase because of this specialization. And now they can trade. They can trade. That is, they can trade. Suppose if 5 beer is equal to 15 wine, if this is the ratio, then Liberland is specializing in wine. Okay, so Liberland will give 15 wine to Freeland and get 5 additional beer. So both countries will gain. But I'm not talking about what is the distribution of gain within a country, okay? And also between the countries. So what is the terms of trade? We don't know. For example, let me give you a simple example. Suppose if the total gain is let's say 10%. If the total gain is 10%, and there are two countries, A and B. So this is the total increase in the production. If country B is more powerful than country A, then the distribution of this gain between these two countries might also be 9% and only 1%. Still, you can safely say that both countries will gain because country A is gaining by 1%, country B is gaining by 9%, right? Though this distribution of gain is pretty skewed, is pretty unequal, but yes, both countries are benefiting from trade. So this is basically what we call the political economy of international trade. So some economists also argue on this front as well, that yes, we are gaining, but we don't discuss the distribution of this gain. That distribution is not equal and fair. Anyway, this is beyond the jurisdiction of this course. Now, we talked about a theory of absolute advantage, but remember in that theory, I gave you the example in such a way that one country has absolute advantage in one product and the other country has absolute advantage in another product. In other words, the workers in one country are more productive in one sector. The workers of another country have or are, sorry, more productive in another sector, and these two countries are trading. But that is not always the case. I don't want to name any country, but it is possible that one country has the workers in that country are more productive than another country in all sectors, because of the technology, because of the literacy rate, because of the level of education. There's so many factors. So we know, and you all know as well, that there are countries where workers are not as productive as other countries in any sector, but still these two countries are trading. Why? Because the theory of absolute advantage suggests that if workers are more productive in one country, then that country should trade with those countries where workers are less productive. But in this case, that country should not be trade, because the workers in that country are not productive in any sector compared to other countries. But trade is still taking place in the world. So then David Ricardo actually proposed this theory, that is the theory of comparative advantage. So yes, one country may have absolute advantage in both products, but it must have a comparative advantage in one product and comparative less advantage in another product. Then trade is possible. How? Let's see this. So the advantage that comes from producing something at a lower opportunity cost than others are able to do. So we have introduced this new term that we have already discussed in the very first session, that is the opportunity cost, production possibilities curve, and opportunity cost. So here we are going to use this concept. So we will calculate the opportunity cost of producing, and country will produce and export those products in which they have lower opportunity, or they face lower opportunity cost. How this theory is going to work, or how we are going to calculate, let's take this simple example. So remember, I said production possibilities curve and opportunity cost. So I am giving you first this data, and then I'll show you production possibilities curve as well. Not the curve, not the diagram, but I'll show you the tabular form, or in the form of table. So this is example again. Now this time I have taken, not I actually, the textbook has taken now the two real countries, United States and Philippines. And we have two products, wheat and beans. The unit is number of bushels. So I'm not going to, say every time bushel. So I just say wheat and beans, which I mean, so if I say 4 wheat, I mean 4 bushels per day of wheat. Okay. So now you have output per worker by country and industry. And so you have two industries, basically wheat and beans, or two product, but no issue, or two product. Now, so if you notice here, this is exactly the same data that I showed you earlier, but the only difference is, notice that the workers in the United States are more productive in both products. That is, if I mark here, so compare United States and Philippines, you notice that in the wheat sector, US workers are 4 times more effective than workers in Philippines. Okay, in Philippines. Whereas in the production of beans, workers in US are still more productive compared to Philippines. But if you look at the gap between these two productivities, that is, in the wheat sector, US is more productive. 1:4, right? So 4 times more productive. But here the gap is not that much. It's not 4 times. Okay. So the gap is just one. So comparatively or relatively, US workers are more productive in wheat compared to beans. They are more productive in both sectors. But if you compare which one is more productive than wheat sector, US workers are more productive in wheat sector compared to beans relatively. So this is what we are going to calculate, because we just don't calculate by looking at the difference 4 minus 1 and 4 minus 3. This is not going to happen. This is clearly visible, sometimes not visible. So there's a rule. So let me first read this and then I show you how you do this. So each country has a trade-off, that is opportunity cost for each item it produces. Okay. Now this statement is telling us that we have to calculate the cost, or in the bracket, that's why I wrote opportunity cost within a country. So right now I'm not talking about trade. I'm talking about just one country. Let's take just United States for the for example. So let's take United States for example. If I ask you that if United States produces 1 unit of wheat, that is this 1 unit of wheat, only 1 unit of wheat, how many units of beans US will not be able to produce? Of course, US has a limited number of workers. Okay, so if you're producing wheat, it means you can't produce beans using that same worker, because you have already been using those workers in the production of wheat. So it's not possible. So we calculate that what is the cost of using workers in the production of wheat in terms of beans. And you can see it's so easy. Why? Because of this example, you can see that 4 and this is also 4. Let me erase this everything and then I'll tell you. And there's a rule as well. So you have 4 here. Oh, sorry. You have 4 here. You have 4 here. So if you produce 4 units of wheat, you will not be able to produce 4 units of beans, because the productivity is same 4 and 4, luckily, only in this example. So if you get, so the cost of producing 4 units, suppose if US uses it's one worker, only one worker in the production of wheat, that worker will produce 4 bushels. What does this mean? It means that is the same worker will not be producing beans. How many bushels of beans? 4. It means you are giving up 4 bushels of beans in order to produce 4 bushels of wheat. I'm not interested 4. I'm interested in one wheat. So again, if the ratio is same 4 and 4, so I can safely say that if US produces 1 unit or 1 bushel of wheat, then US will have to give up 1 bushel of beans. So the opportunity cost of producing 1 bushel of wheat is 1 bushel of beans. This is what is written here. This. So the cost, although we just write cost, but I mean opportunity cost. So cost of producing 1 unit of wheat is 1 beans in United States. Similarly, the opportunity cost of producing 1 unit of beans in the United States is 1 wheat. So opportunity cost is 1 to 1, luckily. Now let's come to Philippines and calculate opportunity cost. So if one worker, let me erase this and then I will show for Philippines. So if one worker produces wheat, I'm marking here. If one worker produces wheat or is used or is employed in the production of wheat, that one worker will produce 1 bushel of wheat in Philippines, because it is written one. One means the productivity of worker is 1 bushel. So each worker will produce 1 bushel. If you hire one worker in the production of wheat, then you cannot hire the same worker in the production of beans. And therefore, whatever this worker, uh, if this worker that is currently employed in the sector, in the wheat sector, if this worker had been employed in beans, then the same worker would have been producing three beans, because the productivity of workers in bean sector in Philippines is three. That is 3 bushels produced per worker. So if you are producing one wheat in Philippines, technically you are giving up 3 beans. So the cost of producing one wheat in Philippines is 3 beans. So that is why I wrote 3 beans here. And the cost of producing beans in terms of wheat is 1/3 wheat, just one, not three. You know why I wrote 1/3? Because I'm not talking about opportunity cost of 3 beans. I'm talking about only one bean. So if you don't produce one bean in Philippines, technically you are giving up not one wheat, because 3 bean equal to one wheat. So one bean is equal to 1/3 beans. So that is 1/3 beans. Now this is the explanation, and I know if you don't understand, I totally understand, because for the very first time I know that's pretty confusing. But I'll give you the rule, and the rule is so simple that you can easily write down these numbers. Once you have these numbers, then the analysis will be very easy. So let me erase everything and tell you the rule, that what is the rule that you have to follow. So this is the rule. So if you have these productivities given here in this table, so these are all labor productivities. You can see output per worker. Okay, so these numbers are given. If you have to calculate opportunity cost, so you need 4 numbers. One number here, then here, then here, and then here. The rule is, if you want to write number here, okay, the rule is always take this number first, always take the opposite column, not the same wheat column, because you are writing in the wheat column. You are writing here, here. So in the wheat column, just take the beans column, exactly opposite, and take this number and divide by this number, wheat number. So 4 divided by 4 is 1. That's why I wrote 1. If you want to write number here, here, so this is the bean column. So you just take the wheat number first, 4, and then divide by 4, luckily 1, because both are same. So 4 divided by number first, 4, and then divide by 4, luckily 1, because both are same. So 4 divided by 4 is always 1. That's why you have 1, 1. Now look at this wheat for the Philippines. So you have to write numbers here. You have to write number here. This is the wheat column. So go to the beans column for Philippines, 3. So first take this number 3 and then divide by 1. So 3 divided by 1 is 3. That's why I wrote 3. And then you have to write number here. How you write number here? This is in the beans column. So go to the wheat. Wheat is 1. So 1 and divided by this 3. That's why I wrote 1/3. So whatever column you are filling, just take the opposite column in the numerator and divide by the same column that you are in actually. That will give you the opportunity cost. Okay. Now, once you calculate this, you calculate your own as well and see whether you are following this session or not. If not, you can always text me on my cell or email, message me using Blackboard messaging service. So now I have just copied the same opportunity cost in this table. Okay. Now, rather than comparing as we did in theory of absolute advantage, we compared uh, productivities directly. We did not even, we haven't, we did not calculate opportunity cost. Here we have calculated opportunity cost. Why? Because we couldn't compare productivities, because productivities are higher in US compared to Philippines in both products. So there's no point. Now I first calculated opportunity cost, and notice what we got. So if you compare opportunity cost, so in the production of wheat, the very first column, so in the wheat column, notice compare these two countries. So now we are comparing costs. That is cost of producing wheat, not beans, wheat. The cost of producing wheat in United States is just one bean, whereas in Philippines is three beans. So opportunity cost is lower in the production of wheat in United States. Why? I told you that US workers are more productive in the production of wheat compared to Philippines. US workers are still productive in production of beans, but less productive uh, compared to wheat sector. So United States has comparative advantage in the production of wheat. Why? So I'm just connecting this. US has comparative advantage in the production of wheat. How do I know? Because the opportunity cost, the cost of producing wheat is lower compared to Philippines. Now look at what is happening in beans. Exactly opposite. I know workers are more productive in United States, but if you compare cost of producing beans in terms of wheat, uh, Philippines has a lower cost, just 1 over 3. 1 over 3 means 0.33 wheat, whereas in United States is higher, 1 wheat. Why it's higher? Because workers in wheat sector in United States are more productive. So if you're taking workers from wheat sector and producing beans, you are basically losing money. Why? Because you are producing more productive worker in wheat, and now you are producing those workers in beans. So they are not as productive as in the wheat sector. And that is the reason why comparatively or relatively Philippines has comparative, I'm not saying absolute, comparative advantage in the production of beans. So beans will be produced by Philippines, and these two countries will trade. Let me read this. The US is comparatively better at making wheat. It gives up only one beans, while the Philippines gives up three. The Philippines is comparatively better at beans. It gives up 1 over 3 of wheat, while the US gives up 1. So both can be better off specializing with trade. So both countries will trade, United States and Philippines. And you must have noticed this in the real world as well. Do you think that United States or Canada or other developed countries, are they going to produce very primitive and very basic products and export? No, because it costs them too much in terms of another product. Since these countries have advanced technology, so these countries will specialize in more advanced and more sophisticated products like fighter jets, like computers, like high-tech products. They're not going to produce pencils and rubber and basic products I don't know what to, like simple calculators. They're not going to produce. So you seldom see calculators, basic calculators, made in China, made in United States. Right? You might see made in China or made in Indonesia or made in Taiwan, even made in other countries. So this is the reason. So United States workers are more productive even in the production of basic calculators, but they are not wasting resources in producing calculators. They are now using their skilled workers in the sector where they are more productive, and the profit margin is much higher. So that is the reason why these two countries are trading. Although the examples doesn't suit the real life scenario because both products are agricultural products. So now I'm going to show you that if these two countries trade, both countries will gain. And how do we show this? I showed you earlier that the total production of these two countries will be higher after trade compared to before trade. So this is the production possibilities schedule. I don't say it's production possibilities curve, right? So there's no curve. So this is the same data. Now notice in the United States, so we have wheat and beans. So US has different combinations. So US can produce all wheat, zero beans, 320, 80, 240, all these. Similarly, Philippines also have different option. Notice we just picked, this is just, so if you ask me why I have chosen option C, that is point C on US PP, and point B on Philippines. So we that's why that is why it says suppose. So you could have taken any other point as well. It doesn't make any difference. So suppose if I have chosen option C and not option, sorry, point C and production point B in Philippines. So right now, before trade, what is happening? United States is producing 240 bushels of wheat and 160 bushels of beans. Similarly, Philippines is producing 80 bushels of wheat and 60 bushels of beans. So if you calculate the total production of wheat and total production of beans, so this is given here. Total production is 320. So basically, I added 240 and 80, and total production of beans 220. I added 160 and 60 for both countries. Now, if trade takes place, and I showed you in the previous slide that US has comparative advantage in the production of wheat. So US will actually produce all wheat. Again, complete specialization. So now US will produce all wheat, that is 400. So you can easily see 400 is greater than this total production of 320. And similarly, Philippines will also produce all beans, that is 300, which is also greater than total production of beans in both countries, that is 160 and 60. Why this is happening? Because workers are more productive in US in the sector of in wheat sector, and workers are relatively more productive in the bean sector in Philippines, and therefore these two countries are specializing. And you can see total production, world production, if we assume that there are only two countries, has gone up. So this is shown in the next slide, which I just showed you here. So 400 wheat and 300 beans. So you can see we have now 8 more wheat and 80 more wheat and 80 more beans. Now it all depends on the bargaining power of these two countries, that how this gain will be distributed between these two countries. But both countries will definitely benefit. I said both countries. I'm not saying each individual in that country will be benefited. So this is the theory of comparative advantage. What I have done actually, I have given you this example, and I'm not going to discuss here, but I'll show you on the screen. So since I'm recording the session, you have this on your screen. Make sure you should be able to answer this question. I've already given you the solution. So just go through the solution and see if you can understand this question. Suppose Canada and Jordan only trade with each other, and they both produce the same two goods, meat and tomatoes. Given their resources, Canada can process either 200 tons of meat per day or 230 tons of tomatoes. That is, see, I wrote or in capital and also in red. So I'm not saying that both. So in one day, Canada can either produce 200 tons of meat or 230 tons of tomatoes. It's not possible that you can produce 200 tons of meat and 230 tons of tomatoes at the same time in one day. That's not possible. This is the maximum production. So either of these two. Jordan can process either 80 tons of meat or 160 tons of tomatoes. So this time I haven't given you production per worker. I just have given you per day production maximum. These are the question. Which country has absolute advantage in producing in both goods? What is the opportunity cost of producing 1 ton of meat in Canada? What is the opportunity cost of producing 1 ton of meat in Jordan? Which country has the comparative advantage in producing meats and why? Which country has the comparative advantage in producing tomatoes and why? So the best way to answer this question, this is the data that is given. So you have to be able to write this data in a tabular form that I showed you earlier. So I'm going to show you this tabular form. So this is always you do this, right? The first 3 columns. So first write 2 countries in the first column, Canada and Jordan. And then on the second and third, you have meat, M, and tomatoes, T. And you have these numbers, 200. These are in tons, 230, 80, and 60. Notice that Canada has absolute advantage. Why? Because 200 is more than 80. So in one day, Canada can produce more meat. Similarly, for tomatoes, Canada can produce more tomatoes compared to Jordan. So Canada has absolute advantage in both products. But still, Canada is trading with Jordan. How? Using the theory of comparative advantage. So by OC, I mean opportunity cost of 1 ton of tomato, 1 ton of meat. So I'm calculating the opportunity cost of meat. So I'll take this 230 first and then divide by. So this is how I do 230 divided by this 200. So this is how I get all these 4 numbers. And then I compare. And then the answers are given here. Okay. Oh, no, answers are not given. Oh, I'm sorry. So you have to write the answer. Which country has comparative advantage? You have to just compare the opportunity cost. So I can see here this number, this number is less than this number. So Canada has comparative advantage in the production of meat. So meat will go to Canada, and this number is lower than this number. So Jordan has comparative advantage, lower cost, lower opportunity cost in the production of tomatoes. So tomatoes will go to Jordan. So Canada will specialize in producing meat, and Jordan will specialize and produce tomatoes, and these 2 countries will trade. Why? Simply because of the differences in opportunity costs. So we are just comparing opportunity costs. Okay. Intra and inter-industry trade. This is just a definition, and I just want to, write here by intra and inter-industry trade. So what you need to know is just the difference. Inter-industry trade is trade between developing and developed countries. When I say inter-industry trade, I mean trade between 2 countries into different sectors, totally different sectors. That is, Canada is importing, let's say, automobile from South Korea, and we are suppose exporting wheat or soya bean to South Korea. See, these are 2 different industries, and trade is taking place. This is called inter-industry trade. So this is normally between developing and developed countries. So developed countries are exporting manufactured high-tech product, whereas importing most of the agriculture produce from developing world. Intra-industry trade, I mean that the 2 countries are trading the similar product with the same industry, So for example, United States is exporting heavy trucks to one country and importing small vehicles from that country. So the industry is same automobile, but you have different types of product. So Canada is importing blue cheese, for example, from Switzerland, and also exporting another type of cheese to Switzerland. So this is the same product, but different qualities. The example that is given in your book, Europe exported 2.6 million motor vehicles in 2002 and imported 2.2 million of them as well. So you don't think that they are exporting and importing exactly identical product. Yes, we have same industry, automobile industry, but we have different types of automobile as well. Japan exported 4.7 million vehicles in 2002, 1 million of which went to Europe and 2 million to North America, and also imported 0.3 million as well. So basically, trade is taking place within the same industry, and that is normally trade among developed countries. So you can't expect that Japan is engaged in intra-industry trade with Bangladesh or with Pakistan. It's not possible because we are not producing. We means Pakistanis and Bangladesh countries. These two countries are not producing automobiles. We don't have that technology. Yeah, we are assembling, but we are not actually producing because all those assembly line was actually established by Japanese firms in Pakistan, at least. I don't know about Bangladesh. But anyway, my point is that normally intra-industry trade is taking place between similar countries. That is similar in terms of level of development. Now, terms of trade, you just need to know the formula only. You don't need to study further. The average price of a country's exports compared with the price of its import. That is called terms of trade. So average price of exports divided by average price of imports multiplied by 100. So just present in percentage, right? So if terms of trade is increasing, that is good for the country. Why? Because you are exporting at a higher price and importing at a lower price. So you are making money. So this is what we call terms of trade simply. Okay. Now, advantages of free trade. So if there are no trade restrictions, if there are no tariffs, if there are no import quotas, if there are no other regulations, then free trade is advantageous because of these four reasons. Number one, lower prices as a result of lower cost of production. So if you're importing, why you are importing? Because that country can produce the product at a lower cost. So if you're importing a product at a lower cost, definitely the price will be lower here in Canada. And therefore consumers are happy at least that they can buy product at a lower price. Higher incomes as well. Why higher incomes? Because if you are exporting freely to other countries, you will make more money. By free trade, I mean both export and imports. A greater variety and quality of products as well. So you have different varieties. Increased competition as well. So domestic farms, domestic producers will have to compete with imported goods and services, that is foreign firms. Because if they don't compete, they'll be out of the market because of the free trade. So now we discuss slightly more in detail the winners and losers from trade. So this is the diagram that you can see. So I have taken two countries. One is France, the other one is Germany. And although the two diagrams look similar, but if you see the x-axis, the numbers are different. So although the distance is same, see this distance and this distance is very similar, but they are not, because in the graph I can't show with this limited space. So what I've done, if you notice here, this is only 7, whereas this is 15. It's much higher. Okay, remember this. Now what is happening in these two countries, and there's only one product. Let's say this is you have to read the textbook. So it is either beer or wine. I think it's wine. Anyways, Right now, it says without free trade. So there's no trade. France, this is the domestic market. This is the market for, I don't want to say the product because I don't remember. Maybe in the next slide, let's see if they have given you the, do you see the product export of, no. Okay, you have to see in the textbook, right? You have to see in the textbook. It's either wine or beer, okay? Or whatever product is, right? Doesn't make any difference, right? But the product must be liquid, right? Liters per month. So notice these are the two domestic markets, and in France, the price, domestic price is 5, and the equilibrium quantity is 15. So people are, or this market, consumers are buying 15 liters of this product, let's say wine, and the price is fine or five, sorry, dollar. In Germany, the price of wine is $8, whereas the total equilibrium quantity is 7. So the price is higher in Germany. The price is lower in France for the same product. Maybe because of productivity. Maybe workers are more productive in France. That is why their price is lower. Maybe they have a slightly advanced technology. Maybe the environment is such that it is more conducive to the production of this product in France better than Germany. Whatever be the reason, the prices are different. So trade is possible. That is why consumers in Germany are paying this $8. Why not buy from France for $5? But France will not sell this product at $5 in Germany. Why? Because domestic producers, they don't need to. Whatever they are producing, they are willing to produce 15 liters and at $5, and they are selling all 15. So they don't need to export this product at $5 because they're selling whatever they are producing domestically. Yes, these workers, these workers in France, these producers, sorry, not workers, these producers, they are definitely willing to export if prices are higher than 5. So let's say, suppose if the price is 6, notice what is happening. At 6, these domestic producers are willing to supply more. Yes, they are willing to supply more. But of course, consumers are not willing to pay $6. All of them. Some of them are still willing to, you can see, some of them are willing to pay slightly higher prices. So demand, the equilibrium, the domestic demand will definitely decrease from 15 to 12. So that is possible. Similarly, in Germany, consumers are not willing to buy this product at higher than $8 because they can easily buy this at $8. Yes, some consumers, that is, those consumers, those who are not consuming this 7 liters of wine. Why? Because they can't afford to pay $8. If price is less than $8, then yes, you can see some consumers, those who were not initially buying this, they are also interested in buying this product. Why? Because price has gone down. So basically, the world price or international price must lie between $5 and $8, between these two price level. So let's assume, let me show you here in this next diagram. So let's assume the price is $6. That is possible. Higher than 5 and lower than $8. See what would happen. So if you notice, if price is $6, then in France, the demand, domestic demand is only 13. So domestic consumers are only buying 30, whereas suppliers in France, they are producing 19. So this 6 additional unit they are unable to sell domestically. So they export these 6 units to Germany. At what price? 6. Similarly, in Germany, when price decreases to $6, consumers are demanding 11 units or liters, sorry. Where consumers are demanding 11 units or liters, sorry. Whereas domestic suppliers, they're not going to supply more because price has gone down. Earlier, they were charging $8. Now the price is $6. So they will only produce 5 units. So there's excess supply. There's a shortage. Consumers are demanding more than domestic producers are producing. So this shortage will be met by importing. So Germany will import wine from France, 6 units or 6 liters. Okay. Now, if look at these two diagrams, there are basically four groups. Number one, producers and consumers in France, producers and consumers in Germany. So producers in let's first consider France. Producers in France, they're happy. Why they're happy? Because they are now selling more units at a higher price. They are making money. So that is, they are always in favor of free trade. That is no restriction. But consumers in France, they are not happy because some of them will not even able to buy. And those who are buying these 13 liters, they are paying higher price, $6 instead of 5. So those who are not buying this anymore because of high price, they're always against free trade. They always say, when trade was, when France was not trading with Germany, we were able to purchase wine, but now we are not because price has gone up because of trade. So this is what is written here. France, producers gain, consumers lose. In Germany, what is happening? Consumers are happy, and that is why additional consumers are this much. Earlier it was 7, and now 11 liters are being consumed. Why? Because they are paying lower price, lower than $8. Now they are only paying $6. They are happy. So they are always in favor of free trade. But what about domestic producers in Germany, those who are producing wine and selling at $8? Now they have to sell their product at $6 because they have to compete with French wine, and therefore they are not happy. So producers in the importing country will never be in favor of free trade, and that's why in the United States the farmers and sugar industry, these producers are so powerful that they forced and sometimes motivate government to put restriction on imports of sugar from Mexico, for example. Okay, so we have winners and losers always. Now, if these losers are powerful, so in this case, consumers are the losers in France. But there are so many consumers, so it's very difficult to protest, right? You can't take all those consumers on one page. Why? Because the consumer loss, overall loss, maybe $1 million, the overall loss. But for one consumer, the loss is just $2. So for $2 loss, you are not going to leave your job and take a placard and stand on the side of the road and that protest for just $2, right? So that is the problem with the consumers. But with producers, if producers are the losers, they are few and they are big, and their loss is also big. So they have incentives to protest and to compel government to put restrictions on trade so that they can survive. So if losers are powerful, then government actually put restrictions. And these are the 4 types of restriction: tariffs, currency exchange controls, bureaucratic regulations, and voluntary export restrictions. So let me stop here. It's too much for this session. Not too much, but you have to digest. I'm not saying too much in terms of time. I'm saying too much in terms of content that we covered. So first, you just review these topics. So in the next session, probably today, definitely today, I'm going to record the remaining topics of this chapter. I can quickly show you. So we'll discuss this trade restriction, but we will only concentrate more on tariffs. We are not going to discuss currency exchange controls, bureaucratic regulation, voluntary export restrictions. So with tariffs, we discuss this tariff, and then I show you this diagram, and then we also discuss arguments against free trade. So some economists also uh, arguments argue against, in favor of uh, restricted trade or against free trade. So there are certain arguments we are going to discuss, and also I'll give you the counter arguments as well, right? And that's all I believe. I believe that's all, right? So this is just another. Okay, why not? I'm sorry. Why not finish it? I don't think it takes too much time. So just fix in just one session. So these are the trade restriction tariffs. Currency exchange controls means that you cannot import goods and services from abroad if you don't have foreign currency. So government actually put a restriction on foreign exchange. So you can't buy foreign exchange, therefore you cannot export. So that is one way to restrict imports. Bureaucratic regulations. So I have just written here, this is what we call red tape or informal or administrative policies. So for example, if you are importing flowers from Netherlands, Holland, and if the administrative procedure is so lengthy that your whole imports will be ruined at the port, what are you going to do? Similarly, they put restriction, what we call safety, health, and quality restriction. They say, your packaging does not conform to our standards, and they reject. So these are some of the tactics that many countries use to restrict trade. This is what we call bureaucratic regulations. Custom regulations can act as a form of protection and trade restriction. Voluntary export restriction is basically that one country requests the other country that reduce your export. If you don't reduce your export, then we will put heavy tariffs on your export. So that is called voluntary export restrictions. But I'll stick to tariffs only. So that's why I wrote tariffs, imports tariffs. I'm not talking about export tariffs. A tax or duty levied on imports. Sometimes we have export tariffs as well. That if government want to discourage export, the government says, okay, for those producers, those firms, if you are going to export to the other country, you will have to pay tax. That is also possible. But we are not discussing this. We are just discussing import tariffs. That is, if we import, then we have to pay taxes, either the fixed rate, that's $2 per unit, or ad valorem taxes, that is a percentage, that 5% tax of the total value if you import. So tariffs are generally pro-producers and anti-consumer, definitely. Because if you put restriction in imports, that is, if you impose taxes on imports, what will happen? Price will increase. Producers are happy, domestic producers. Now they can produce more because prices have gone up because of the imposition of taxes, import taxes. Consumers are worse off. They are not better off. Why? Because now they have to pay higher prices. So reduce overall world efficiency, inefficient domestic producers. So inefficient domestic producer will also be able to produce. Why? Because of the tariffs. Otherwise, they can't produce. Why? Because the price is so low that they cannot produce at that low price because they're inefficient. But tariffs actually protect them. So I'll draw just one diagram. That is the demand and supply. You can see all this diagram. And now let me show you one thing. So suppose the equilibrium price is above it, right? It's Okay, hold on. Suppose that the world price that says PW, this is the world price. What is the meaning of world price? World price means that this country can buy and sell at this price. Now, this is the domestic supply and domestic demand gap. That's why it's written as SD and DD. And yes, the production is wine. Okay, the product is wine, sorry. So at this PW, notice by just using this demand and supply, I can read. So I know that domestic suppliers are willing to supply only this much. Why? Because if they supply more, they have to charge higher prices because their cost will be higher than price. So they are not going to produce incurring losses. And consumers are willing to buy this much of this product because of lower price. So there's huge demand, excess demand, shortage. This shortage will be imported. So right now at PW price, this amount from here to here will be imported. Now government wants to restrict this import. Why? In order to support these domestic producers. So government says, okay, if you import, then you have to pay taxes. So those importers who are importing this product at PW world prices, they'll have to pay taxes. And tax is, let's say, is a fixed flat rate, that is tax of $T per unit. So for each import, each unit, the price will increase. So earlier it was PW, now it is P1. What is P1? P1 is actually equal to PW plus T. So the importer will increase the price as well. They are not going to pay from their own pocket. So if I'm importing one product, let's say just one unit for $5, and if government says that you have to pay $1 tax, then of course I will just charge $6 price for that product. $5 plus $1 tax. That is what I have added P1. So when price increases, these producers, domestic producers, now they can produce more. So notice they produce here on the supply curve. Now they can produce more. Why they are producing more? Because price has gone up. But consumers, they are worse off. They are not going to be here. Now they will consume at this point. Their demand will be this much. Why? Because this is a higher price. So notice import has gone down only this much. Earlier it was this much. So import shrinks. When import decreases, what is happening? So basically, one thing that is in the diagram, and we are not going to discuss in detail. There are so many things we discussed, but in that different course, so there's no point here. This is more interested. Okay, let me show. I'm sorry. This area, that's this rectangle. This is government tax revenues, because you can see this is the tax. I told you that the difference between PW and P1 is, or PT, I think it's not P1, it's PT. But PT, oh sorry, so this is PT is equal to PW plus T, that is with tariffs. So you know that this is, suppose $1, suppose this is $1. So $1 tax per unit. And we know that this is the imports. So let's say this is 10 units. So now the country is importing 10 units. So 10 times 1, $10. So this, the area of this rectangle is $10. So this is the tax revenue, government tax revenue. And there are of course some inefficiency losses, deadweight loss. This is what we call there's increase in producer surplus, all that stuff we are not going to discuss, at least in this course. But we tell you using this diagram that this is the total amount of tax revenues. Producers are happy in the domestic country, and consumers are not happy because they are paying higher prices. Now, there are some arguments in favor of trade restriction. That is, you can see consumers are not happy, but there are certain arguments that actually favor this trade restriction. And these arguments are these. First is strategic industry argument, right? So, this argument simply says that, we should protect our defense-related industries, because during war, we can't import tanks and other arms and ammunition, right? That is the argument. You have to read this slide. So I just discussed. Second, infant industry arguments. Because according to this argument, sometimes our local industries cannot compete with the international or foreign firms because those firms are too big. So it's very difficult to compete because you are right now at the initial stage. So this is the government job to protect these infant industry. But this argument, is not valid. Why? This is the example that I have given you. Brazil built the world's 10th largest auto industry behind the tariffs and quota. So Brazilian government protected this automobile industry, right, heavily. Why? Because Brazilian government thought at that time that this industry is at its initial stage. So this industry should be protected from the international competition. And then when this industry will develop, then we will open trade. Now see what happens. After, so quotas, barriers were removed in the late 1980s. After 30 years, Brazil auto industry was one of the most inefficient. Why? Because that industry was so used to this protection that they will never be efficient, because they know that they are inefficient and they will be protected by the government. So again, you have our arguments and counter arguments. Cultural identity argument. Some countries restrict imports simply because they want to maintain their cultural identity. And this is the example here for Japan. So free trade brings mass production and standardization, which may harm the importing country's sense of identity. For example, average tariff in Japan is 4.5%, but the tariffs on agriculture is 15.5%, because they are suppose growing rice for centuries and they don't want to destroy their culture. So they protect the importation of rice, although they could easily import rice from Vietnam at a very low price, but they keep producing their own rice as well, just to keep their culture alive. That is another argument. Environmental and labor standards. So developed countries normally argue that why we restrict trade from the developing countries, because they are not maintain the labor and environmental standards. So they are hiring child labor, they are hiring basically workers with pathetic living standards, and they don't provide any services to their workers. So they are not even paying they are paying them wages that are enough to make their both ends. So because of this, we can't compete with them. Why? Because we are paying health insurance, we are paying everything to our workers. We are also taking care of environmental standards as well. They are polluting, so their cost will be lower, and that is the reason they are selling at a cheaper rate. That is the reason we impose tariffs on these products. So protection basically from unfair foreign competition. For example, I don't want to name go in detail, but China actually subsidized its auto parts industry heavily. So, if government is subsidizing its export sector, definitely they are going to sell at a lower price in the international market. So domestic producers in the developed countries, they can't compete because government is supporting them. So that is unfair competition. And because of unfair competition, developed countries or countries argue that we have the right to protect our domestic industries by putting heavy tariffs on imports. So that's all as far as chapter number 10 is concerned. Make sure you review those practice questions that I've already uploaded to your course website. Again, I'm available. If you have any questions, any concerns, do not hesitate to contact me. You have my cell number. You can also text me or you can also send me a message through Blackboard messaging service. Thank you so much. Take care. Bye-bye.